This guy reincarnated in the worst possible character. That is because he reincarnated as the 7th prince of the empire, Ranabiran. Unlike the other royal children, Ran has pitch black hair while his siblings have beautiful golden hair, and he was born without Manas, the special power possessed by the imperial family. Because of this, everyone treats him like a defective prince who belongs in the trash. But that is not even the biggest problem. Ran is a minor villain from the novel Dark Header, and he is destined to suffer a horrible death shortly after the main story begins. While he is thinking about this, Sane arrives, the guy who will make things worse for him. He hands him a budget proposal to sign, saying that it is an important matter. He knows this guy is playing him for a fool because it is just a fabricated document, and his real goal is to embezzle the 7th prince's share of the budget. The reason this guy can do this is that he is a relative of the Empress, an exceptional woman who has incredible influence over that entire world. Sane even has the balls to openly mock him, saying that maybe he has even forgotten how to sign. He even tells him not to think about anything and to just sign it right there. Those words stun him because before entering the story, his life was already a disaster. A supposed high school friend convinced him to sign a suspicious investment deal without properly reading it. 2 years later, that friend vanished, leaving him buried in debt and barely able to afford food. Then, while reading Dark Header inside his filthy apartment, his nose suddenly began bleeding, his heart failed, and he died alone. Deciding not to live like that anymore, he challenges Sane, telling him that the document is a clear waste of budget, and Sane expresses his surprise that Ran actually thinks so. Sane commends Ran for his intuition but tells him to sign first, promising to review the document afterwards. Sane is in the middle of his trash when Ran hurls a jug at him. The jug hits him before crashing to the ground and scattering into pieces. Sane freaks out, asking Ron what has suddenly gotten over him, but Ron feigns ignorance, claiming that his hand only slipped. Deep down, he knows something about Sane, since he has read the novel over 100 times. It is not a lie that Sane is the Empress's relative, but in reality, it is not more than a distant relationship that even the Empress doesn't know of Sane's existence. Sane is still trying to understand what is going on when Ron completely loses it. He pushes the table, leaving Sane ultimately shocked. Even though Ron has no idea how he got into the story, he has no intention of dying, just like the original story. Ron then shocks Sane, telling him that he is supposed to take responsibility for what just happened. In his past life, he was essentially an NPC, but in this life, he wants to take the bull by the horns. Since he knows everything that happened in the novel, he plans to use it to his advantage. Ran continues with his intimidating talk, telling Sane to get down on his knees and clean the carpet since it is now dirty. Ran looks absolutely menacing because this time around, he plans to survive no matter what it takes. Speaking about the imperial family, they're basically known as gods, and all things in this world exist solely for them. They have special abilities that only they can possess and beautiful blonde hair, which literally makes them look like the incarnation of gods. To Sane, the royals are the very symbol of nobility, but that doesn't include Ran, the 7th prince, whom he considers absolute trash. Everyone knows Ran for being stupid with a short fuse, and his hideous black hair makes him seem more like trash than an imperial royal. Sane sees him as a pathetic loser who acts cowardly in front of other royals. Sane seethes in anger just thinking about how much he spent on bribe money, only to end up serving trash like the 7th prince. However, he has no choice but to swallow his pride because even an abandoned, powerless royal still has an imperial bloodline compared to him, an ordinary servant. After scrubbing the floors clean, Sane informs Ron about it and is about to leave when Ron suddenly shatters another teacup in the same spot, startling Sane, who immediately questions his intentions. Ran sarcastically mocks him for wasting so much time cleaning and orders him to consider this an opportunity to practice his cleaning skills. Ran then sternly orders him to clean up the mess, but this time, faster than he did before. Infuriated by Ron's sudden attitude, Sane tells him that he's acting a bit strange today and tries to intimidate him using the Empress's name. However, this doesn't scare Ron because he knows that Sane has never even seen the Empress's shadow, let alone speak to her, yet he dared to use her name. This makes Ran realize that he must knock some sense into the disrespectful servant before he becomes a nuisance in the future. Ran orders Anna sternly to cover her ears and even threatens to chop off her fingers if she dares to eavesdrop. Terrified, Anna quickly acknowledges the order and tightly shuts her ears to the point where she can only hear Ron's muffled voice. However, Sane's face instantly turns pale, making it clear that Ron's words really did a number on him. Later that day, while doing chores with the other servants, Anna discusses Ron's sudden change in behavior with them. Everyone agrees with Anna as they fearfully explain that Ran is scarier than he used to be. The servants also worry that, with Ran's strange new attitude, they may not live much longer. Even so, they're relieved they haven't crossed paths with him recently, as he has been spending most of his time confined to his quarters. One of the maids then reminds Anna that she's assigned to clean his room, a reminder that leaves her feeling uneasy. Meanwhile, Ran is enjoying the cool weather, sipping tea, and thinking about how to act properly like the real 7th prince in order not to draw suspicion. He has also noticed that all the servants seem to be avoiding him, including Sain, who is usually arrogant in front of him. After getting thrashed that day, Sain hasn't gone near Ran at all, which Ran actually prefers. Ran is this relaxed because he still has at most a year before the main story begins and 3 years before his character is set to be eliminated. In his previous life, Ran read this novel, Darkheader, over 100 times, so he knows exactly how the story is supposed to play out. He came across the worn-out novel in the corner of the local library, and after reading it, Ran became completely obsessed with it. Since there's still some time before the story begins and the main protagonist makes his appearance, Ran decides to just chill and enjoy himself until then. Seeing how nice the weather is today, he wishes he could develop wings and fly into the sky to enjoy the scenery. The moment that thought enters his mind, a sudden pain hits him, causing him to lose control of his body. Ran crumbles to the floor as he tries to make sense of what was happening to his body, which was burning up. Ran notes that this feeling is different from what he felt before, and this time, it was as if his whole body had been set on fire. Before Ran can figure out what is going on, Anna's voice echoes from outside, asking for permission to clean his study. At this point, Ran is unable to move a muscle, and all he can do is mentally call out for help, hoping someone saves him. On the other hand, Anna decides to enter the study, thinking no one is there since Ran didn't respond to her call. Upon entering, Anna is startled to see the broken teacup on the ground, but no sign of Ran anywhere. She then crouches to gather the shards while complaining that the cost of the teacup would have fed her family for a month. She suddenly turns around only to find a crow cawing at her, but instead of being scared, Anna picks up the crow. Feeling bad for the poor creature, Anna wonders how it entered the study, especially since the devil himself lives there. Meanwhile, Ran, who has somehow transformed into a crow, tries to wrap his head around the whole bizarre situation. Unfortunately, before he can make sense of it, Anna prepares to throw him out the window, fearing the crow might be crushed to death if discovered by the scary 7th prince. Ran tries to tell her that he's the so-called 7th prince, but unfortunately, Anna doesn't seem to understand crow language. She then drops him out the window, hoping he flies far, far away. However, Ran drops down the tower like a falling projectile, unable to defy gravity. Ran watches his life flash right before his eyes as he falls rapidly. Refusing to die as a friggin' crow, his tiny brain instantly goes into overdrive as he tries to figure out how to survive. Remembering he has wings, Ran frantically flaps them while praying earnestly, begging it to work before he falls to his death. Fortunately, he quickly figures out how to fly and soars back into the air, thrilled that he's actually flying. However, his excitement quickly fades as he begins to wonder whether he'll ever be able to turn back into a human. By nightfall, Ran had finally transformed back into his human form and returned to his study after switching between human and crow several more times until he eventually figured it out. The only problem is that this ability was never mentioned in the book, and now he could transform into a crow just by willing it. Ran wonders if this is some kind of curse from the crow that latched onto him the first day he reincarnated. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't figure out why he gained this strange ability, and it wasn't even mentioned in the book, leaving him more confused. Ran decides to just go with the flow, but keep the ability a secret from everyone since this development could potentially ruin the progression of the story. However, Ran is certain of one thing, and that is the fact that his new ability is tied to Manis. Just then, Ran is informed that it's time for the evening ritual, prompting him to leave at once for the event he has been eagerly anticipating. Speaking about the evening ritual, it's a sacred event held once a month where the emperor and his primary children gather for a ritual. Although called a ritual, it's actually a succession test where the 7th prince isn't even considered a worthy candidate. Ran had only read about it in the novel, but seeing it up close feels quite different, and as the 7th prince, he has to sit at the very end of the table. Ran is almost blinded by the prince's blonde hair and pale appearance, which, when compared to theirs, his dark hair, makes him look no different from a crow. Out of nowhere, someone suddenly begins to mock Ran for daring to hold his head up instead of his usual cowardly nature. Ran instantly recognizes him as Selos, the 8th prince, and his 17-year-old half-brother, who clearly doesn't consider himself Ran's younger brother. Selos continues to try to get a reaction out of him, while Ran is already irritated and doesn't know what gives Selos the audacity to talk trash when they're both cannon fodder who make a brief appearance in the story. Selos is soon infuriated that he's been ignored and immediately barks at Ran for acting deaf. However, before the situation escalates, the first princess suddenly appears, advising them not to make a scene in front of the king. Selos, who moments ago was acting like the alpha, instantly shrinks into a wet mutt as he apologizes to the first princess. Seeing the first princess take her seat, Ran finally figures out the positions of the other princes, starting from the first prince. They were exactly seated according to their ranks, and the brighter their blonde hair, the stronger their power. Each one of them can wield manis, the special power unique to this world, which gives them their identity as royals. The seventh prince is the only royal born without manis with his pitch black hair, which is why his personality in the book became twisted. A few minutes later, the man of the moment with peak manis steps into the room, prompting everyone to rise on their feet to greet him. It was none other than the emperor, who was at the peak of power in this world. After the salutation, the emperor orders the ritual to begin, immediately after which he places his hand on a blue stone. That blue stone tablet is actually an ancient artifact left behind by Prasa, the first emperor. And when manis is infused into it, the tablet measures the user's manis. The indicator for measuring the level of manis is by how far the light radiating from the tablet can extend. In the emperor's case, his light radiates all the way to the edge of the table, which is considered an insanely impossible feat. However, this leaves Ran wondering if, in the book, the emperor's light originally reached the edge of the table. Afterwards, the emperor calls for those who wish to take on the challenge next, and the first prince, Rasia Abiran, immediately raises his hand. Although there are no restrictions on who can participate in the ritual, everyone sits it out, except the first prince. This is simply because the manas rankings once measured are rarely ever overturned, so the first prince uses it as a show-off in front of other royals, since the amount of manas is equivalent to the magnitude of one's power. Basically, he does this to mark his territory and show them that he's destined to be the next emperor. Unfortunately, today seems to be a bad day for Raja, who immediately starts coughing up blood the moment he tries to channel manas into the tablet. The second prince quickly rushes to his side as everyone scrambles to call a doctor for him. On the other hand, Ran is stunned by the whole situation, even though he's the only one who understands what is truly going on. He has read this scene countless times in the novel and knows that Rasia will soon join his ancestors, coughing up blood from every orifice in his body, which simply means that the main story has begun. Speaking about manas, it's a special power in this world that usually manifests in the royal family and their bloodline, but each person's ability differs. For example, Rasia, the first prince, uses water manis, while the second prince uses fire manas. Rasia's destiny was already set in stone the moment he placed his hand on that blue stone tablet. Ran knew from the start that Rasia probably only had enough manas to cover just a little over half of the tablet. Now that the story has begun, Ran notes that there are only about 6 months left until the next big incident. However, Ran is utterly confused because, according to what he read in the book, Rasia isn't supposed to cough up blood for another 6 months, after which the main protagonist makes his appearance. Ran worries that the story is getting off track with the seventh prince being able to transform into a crow when originally he isn't supposed to possess any manis. Ran wonders if all this is just a coincidence or if his appearance may have upset some kind of balance. Later that night, at Rasia's castle, the doctor checks him thoroughly and reports that there's absolutely nothing wrong with his body. He further adds that the bodies of royals are basically gifts from the gods which remain unaffected by diseases or injuries. Unsatisfied with the results, Rasia almost chokes the doctor for babbling instead of finding the cause of his illness. He angrily curses under his breath, after which he chases the doctor out of his room. Frustrated by the whole thing, Rasia continues to hurl profanities as he slams his fist into a mirror. He wonders where things went wrong when he was healthy and fine earlier in the morning. He racks his brain for anything that was different, but no matter how he thinks about it, everything had been fine until the ritual. While slamming his fist into the shattered wall mirror, Rasia releases a bit of manas, which instantly causes him severe pain. This makes him realize that his whole body feels like it's on fire every time he tries to use manas. Rasia fears that at this rate he might never be able to use manas again, which is a death sentence for any royal, let alone the first prince set to inherit the throne. As he picks up a hookah pipe for a smoke, Rasia tries to convince himself that bad things can never happen to him since he's different from others who are just roadside trash. Taking a puff from the tube, he consoles himself that it's probably nothing to worry about. Suddenly, a voice echoes from the shadows, warning him to lay off the hookah if he wants to survive. Spooked by the sudden unsolicited advice, Rasia hurls the hookah at the figure in the shadows, demanding to know who they are. It turns out to be Ran, who quickly dodges the flying projectile as he notes that Rasia is truly a monster when it comes to his strength. Rasia smirks the moment he realizes that it isn't an assassin trying to finish him, but his cripple of a young brother with no manas. Ran reminds Rasia that if he had truly been an assassin, Rasia would already be dead, since he hadn't even noticed anyone else in the room until Ran spoke. This realization leaves Rasia a little uneasy as Ran taunts the terrible security in the second most heavily guarded place in the entire empire. Rasia then asks how he entered the room in the first place, and Ran casually explains that he simply climbed over the wall. However, Rasia refuses to believe him because the wall isn't exactly 2 feet tall, but Ran has no intention of convincing him as he decides to go straight to the reason he came. He then asks Rasia about his condition, revealing that he knows no one has been able to determine the exact cause of what is wrong with his body. As if amused by the question, Rasia bursts into laughter, like a lunatic who has just had an epiphany. He then praises Ran for poisoning him just to use it as a bargaining chip for when he becomes the Emperor. Rasia then lets Ran know that he miscalculated as he charges forward to grab him, but Ran confidently assures him that he will drop dead in a week with blood spewing from every orifice in his body. This immediately makes Rasia stop in his tracks while Ran reassures him that he didn't use any tricks to poison him. Ran also lets him know that his body will rapidly deteriorate to the point where he'll eventually die, pouring blood from every opening in his body. Ran reveals that he doesn't know who poisoned Rasia, but Rasia will have to listen to him carefully if he wants to survive this crisis. After the meeting with Rasia, Ran heads back to his quarters as a crow, relieved that Rasia is quite easy to use and cowardly as he was in the novel. Ran notes that Rasia didn't even put a tail on him when he left the castle, convincing him that he will be able to use Rasia however he wants. Putting that aside, Ran is happy about his new ability, which makes it convenient to travel to more places without worrying about transportation. Since he's already out, Ran decides to check out a few more spots before calling it a day. A few days later, Anna heads to Ran's room, worrying that he hasn't eaten anything or come out of his room for 2 days. She fears that she might lose her head if something bad happens to him. This fear instantly pushes her to frantically bang on Ran's door, calling out for him. When he doesn't respond, she decides to force her way inside, but Ran suddenly opens the door, causing Anna to lose her footing. Unfortunately, she falls face first, spilling the entire contents of the food tray on Ran's shoes. After an awkward silence between them, Anna immediately begins to bawl her eyes out as she apologizes to him, asking him to end her for her crime. She continues to cry while trying to explain herself, but this only irritates Rand further as he asks how she plans to take responsibility for disturbing him and soiling his shoes. Anna offers to pay with her life and begs him to spare her family, but Rand simply orders her to clean up the mess quickly and get lost. Anna immediately calms down and begins tidying up while Rand warns her never to approach his room unless he personally calls for her. After the warning, he heads back into his room wondering why Anna was acting dramatic and offering her life. Nevertheless, he's glad he laid down the rule to avoid any further annoyance from her. A month after the first prince's incident, a rumor that Rasia had lost his powers quietly spread throughout the imperial palace. Amongst other princes and princesses, this rumor simply let them know that the throne might be up for grabs. According to the novel, Rasia begs the emperor to push forward the hunting competition just to quell the rumors about him losing his powers. This hunting competition was supposed to happen in 6 months, but since things are moving faster than the timeline, Ran convinced him to push the competition forward. Though things are faster than expected, Ran is relieved that they're following the original plot. However, he can't help but wonder if the change is also affecting the protagonist or only those in the imperial city. Today was the day of the royal hunting competition, and Ran hopes to find a certain someone and give them something. After that, he plans to sit back and relax until it's the right time to make his move. Suddenly, Selos begins to mock Ran as usual, pointing out that Ran's black horse perfectly suits his gloominess. Although Ran ignores him, he still worries that Selos is far more hot-headed and impulsive than he was in the original novel. Ran decides to continue ignoring him and focus on the important plans he made for today. Infuriated, Selos barks at him, but Ran doesn't even look at him as he admires the black horse, which he prefers compared to those golden ones ridden by the royals. Ran notes that the original owner might have been useless, but it seems his body at least has some kind of affinity with animals. Soon afterward, they arrive at the entrance to the Imperial Forest, where the Tower of the Beginning stands. This tower is where the first prince performs the opening ritual every year, after which the hunting competition immediately begins. However, this competition is more than just a political show. The emperor then tells Rasia to prepare for the opening ritual, and just as he's about to leave, the second prince, Dito, expresses his gladness that Rasia is in good health. He also asks if Rasia has prepared what to wish for, but Rasia has no idea what he's talking about. Dito then reminds him that the winner of the competition gets to ask one wish of the emperor, and for him it's already certain that the first prince will be today's winner. Rasia walks away, scoffing as he smugly claims that he will obviously be today's winner. After all, the opening ritual is basically a showcase for the next emperor to show off his manis, and it's also a way for the royal family to show the nobles who's in charge. As Rasia heads for the stage, the onlookers fawn over him while others gossip about him losing his powers. Standing in front of the tower, Rasia regrets listening to Ran as he's a bit uneasy that his power might backfire in front of everyone. As he prepares to begin the show of power, he swears to end Ran in the most painful way possible if it turns out Ran tricked him. Ran, who is watching from afar, can tell that Razia is nervous, but he knows that as long as Razia follows his instructions, nothing should go wrong with his powers. Razia manages to pour out every ounce of manas he can muster without experiencing the unbearable pain that plagued him during the previous evening ritual. His power creates a massive vortex that nearly swallows the audience, especially those closest to the stage, prompting someone to order everyone to move back. Reminding himself that he is the first prince destined to become the next emperor, Razia pushes himself even further. He unleashes a powerful surge of water manas into the sky, which descends upon the crowd as a gentle rain. Everyone watches in awe, reminded once again of the immense power the royals possess. After the magnificent show, the crowd cheers loudly for Razia, who can only think about how Ran helped him achieve this result. Ran had given him a black stone to pour his manis into, but Razia doubted the absurd solution at first. According to Ran, the black stone can absorb polluted manis, but Razia didn't believe him. Razia was infuriated when Ran told him to just wait to die since he had no intention of babysitting anyone or saving Razia against his will. Back in the present, Ran is glad he got his hand on the stone, which, according to the book, is supposed to appear in the latter half of the story. Just then, Sane bursts in panting with a bag of stones on his back, which Ran instructed him to bring over. Ran sternly scolds him for not being able to handle a simple task and questions whether Sane brought the bag intact. Sane secretly seethes in anger, wondering how Ran successfully tamed the black horse, which he purposely bought because it's wild and has injured many people. Suddenly, a trumpet echoes as the Emperor announces the beginning of the royal hunting competition. Everyone rushes forward into the forest, some hoping to win just so they can make a wish, while others participate merely for show because they are certain that one of the royals will win. Ran, on the other hand, is the only one who doesn't consider this hunting competition important, so he decides to keep a low profile to avoid drawing any unnecessary attention to himself while he searches for the former Imperial Knight Commander Agony Fetus. Elsewhere, Agony asks his aide, Talon, what he thinks about the opening ritual, and Talon replies that it was like witnessing the power of a god. Agony tells him that the opening ritual felt like it was a display to break the spirits of the nobles. Talon quickly scans their surroundings to ensure they are alone before admonishing Agony for speaking so openly against the royal family. Agony reassures him that no one is nearby to overhear their conversation, confidently reminding him that his wit has kept him alive this long. Elsewhere, Ran continues on his quest to find Agony inside the Imperial Forest, which is divided into 3 main zones. The first zone is the small animal zone close to the entrance, followed by the medium animal zone, and the large animal zone is the farthest one. Ran recalls that, according to the original story, Agony presented a golden fox to the Emperor during this competition. However, Ran has no idea where to find the creature, as this part of the story was only briefly mentioned in a flashback scene. Because of this, Ran has spent the past few days exploring the vast Imperial Forest in his crow form. Since golden foxes are extremely rare, Ran wanted to narrow down their possible location before the day of the hunt rather than blindly searching through the forest. After remembering that the book mentioned Agony washing his hands immediately after the hunt, Ran deduced that the golden fox must have been found near the lakeside in the southwest direction. Armed with all this information, Ran happily charges deeper into the forest to get ahead of Agony. As if it understands Ran's intentions, the black horse picks up the speed, leaving Ran satisfied. Ran then clutches onto the bag of stone, which he asked Sane to bring earlier. He is glad that Sane brought the bag, which he intends to deliver to Agony. A few minutes into the journey, the black horse abruptly stops, leaving Ran confused as he tries to persuade the smug horse. Ran wonders if the horse spotted a beast nearby, or maybe the bag of stone might have been too much for the horse. Frustrated when he gets no response, Ran barks at the horse for being lazy and even threatens to starve him, but the horse immediately bolts, abandoning him. At that very moment, watching his horse gallop away, Ran realizes he may be truly finished. Elsewhere, Agony and Talon continue their journey into the forest searching for prey, but nothing turns up, convincing Talon that luck isn't on their side today. Agony adds that it might be because he's getting old, having lived his entire life as a sword and shield. Talon comforts him as he reassures Agony that his achievements as the Imperial Knight Commander are already great. However, Agony reminds Talon that he's just a retired old man and asks if he has seen the royal family up close. Talon answers that he has not and has only seen them from a distance, just like today. Agony tells him that he will understand one day when he meets them and truly sees the so-called magnificent beings of the Empire. According to Agony, the Fetus family has protected this empire of gods for 1,000 years. This immediately reminds Agony of his conversation with his young son, who is supposed to take his place. Agony told the little boy that he must always be the loyal dog of the imperial family. Agony was showing him their family's business, where they supply goods to the imperial family. They were just about to move to the temple next when the carriage suddenly stopped, and Agony stepped out to check on it. The servant told him that something caught on the wheel and urged him to head back inside. As Agony is about to step into the carriage, he notices the corpse that the carriage had stepped on, lying on the street. Agony figures it must belong to a thief who tried to steal imperial tributes from the temple. Things like this are a common sight in this so-called beautiful empire. When his son tried to step out, Agony yelled at him to stay back because he didn't want his innocent son to see such a horrifying sight. Back in the present, Agony can't stop thinking about his son, who isn't even up to 10 years old. He also notes that the corpse on the ground that day looked younger than his son and was probably already incinerated. This makes Agony question if there's darkness in such a noble empire. Realizing they're running out of time, Talon urges Agony to at least hunt to save face for the Duke's family, even if they don't take first place. Agony quickly apologizes for getting carried away as he assures Talon that he knows where to find a golden fox. Elsewhere, Ran, who was ditched by his horse, is still struggling to get around while carrying a bag of stones. He curses the horse under his breath, swearing to barbecue it after the royal hunting competition. Thanks to carrying the bag, Ran can't transform into a crow, which worries him that he might lose track of Agony. He's also worried that a wild animal might just jump on him, even though he's only in the small animal zone. Ran is spooked when the bush behind him begins to rustle, making him wonder if something is about to jump out of the bush to attack him. Ran racks his brain for solutions, especially since he didn't even bring any weapon. As he rushes out of hiding, Ran makes up his mind to run if the situation gets dangerous. Without paying attention to what's ahead of him, he hurls the stone towards the bush just as Talon raises his head. As the stone hits Talon on the head, Ran immediately recognizes him as Agony's aide from his hair color. At that moment, Agony also rushes over to check on Talon while Ran darts behind a tree, regretting his decision, which has messed up his plans. Ran wasn't expecting to run into them, and now all his carefully laid plan was about to go up in flames. It turns out Ran targeted the former Imperial Knight Commander, Agony, because according to the original story, he's set to become the teacher of the main protagonist, who will someday turn the Empire upside down. Ran had planned to catch the Golden Fox himself, and when Agony arrived, he would insist that Agony was trying to steal his prey. Then Ran would give him the bag of black stones as a punishment, forcing him to carry it around throughout the competition. Unfortunately, hitting Talon has ruined Ran's plan, leaving him utterly confused about how to proceed. On the other hand, Agony scans the surroundings to figure out why anyone would attack his aide. He concludes that the stone was thrown on purpose, but it seems they were aiming for him and mistakenly got his aide. A few minutes later, Talon finally regains consciousness, and Agony urges him to speak if he remembers anything about the assailant. At this point, Ran becomes uneasy because if rumors spread that he tried to kill the head of one of the most powerful families in the Empire, it might not end well for him. As Talon struggles to recall what he saw, Ran's brain goes into overdrive as he tries to figure out his next move. Fortunately, Talon doesn't recall anything, but things suddenly turn for the worse when Agony senses someone lurking nearby. Ran had tried to take this opportunity to flee, only to alert Agony, who instantly chased after him, telling Talon to wait behind. After running for a while, Ran is completely exhausted, especially since he's already carrying such a heavy bag. Believing he has gotten far enough, Ran decides to slow down, hoping an old geezer like Agony wouldn't be able to catch up to him. However, Agony soon catches up, running swiftly like a stallion, leaving Ran frustrated. While chasing the so-called assailant, Agony tells him to reveal his identity, but Ran is too busy trying to figure out how to get away before Agony catches up to him. Ran contemplates ditching the bag because only then can he transform in peace. At this point, he wishes he still had that naughty black horse or the ability to run as fast as it. That strong willpower instantly causes him to gradually transform, successfully escaping Agony's grasp. Agony is baffled when he finds no trace of the assailant he had nearly caught. He could have sworn he saw the figure change shape, but he dismisses the thought, convincing himself it must be his old eyes tricking him. Agony then swiftly slices through a few trees in the surrounding area, yet still finds no sign of the intruder, leaving him to wonder if they have already escaped. Meanwhile, Ran hasn't quite figured out what was happening to him, but he could feel his body getting lighter, leaving him wondering if he had transformed into a crow. However, he quickly dismisses that thought because it felt like he was still running and not flying. Just then, he hears the sound of hooves nearby and wonders if the stubborn horse decided to grace him with his presence again. At that very moment, Ran realizes that the horse didn't return, but he himself has transformed into the same black horse. Back in the hunting ground, Dido praises Rasia for winning the competition even though the winner has yet to be decided. He asks what Rasia plans to ask as his wish, and after considering it for a brief second, a wicked grin spreads across Rasia's face as he reveals that he already has something in mind. Elsewhere, Ron has transformed back into his human form, but now he's frustrated because his whole plan has been ruined and he dropped the bag of stones while running away earlier. Frustrated by the situation, he rolls on the ground like a child throwing a tantrum over candy, but since agonizing changes nothing, Rand decides to retrace his steps to search for the bag. Meanwhile, Agony returns to where he left Talon and asks how his head is feeling. Talon assures him that he's fine, aside from a little dizziness. Curious about the outcome of the chase, he asks what happened, and Agony explains that he unfortunately lost the assailant because his old bones couldn't keep up with the pursuit. Talon then notices the bag Agony brought back and asks about it. Agony explains that he found it on his way back. Examining the bag, Talon recognizes it as a luxury item but can't understand why it's filled with nothing but stones. At the same time, Ran anxiously listens to their conversation from behind a nearby tree, and after waiting a few moments, he suddenly steps out of hiding, pretending he has been searching for the bag all along. Agony and Talon quickly pay their respects, and Agony asks Ran if the bag belongs to him. Ran replies that it belongs to him and he was just wondering where it disappeared to. He then sternly questions whether they stole his bag, but Agony quickly denies the accusation, explaining that he found the bag by chance while walking through the forest. However, Ron refuses to believe him, so Agony swears by his life and the honor of his entire family that he didn't steal the bag. Ran then asks why Talon's head is bleeding, and Agony simply tells him that it's from a small accident. Just then, Talon raises his head to meet Ran's eyes and instantly recognizes him as the assailant from earlier. However, just as Talon is about to identify, Rand swiftly grabs him by the head while Agony almost steps in to mediate. As if annoyed, Rand sternly questions Talon for daring to interrupt him. He threatens to cut off Talon's head to teach him a lesson and asks Agony to lend him a sword. Terrified, Talon almost starts weeping while Agony apologizes and begs Rand to show Talon mercy. Rand sarcastically commends Agony for his loyalty as the loyal imperial dog of the Empire who doesn't even blink when his aide is on the verge of death. This immediately reminds Agony of the corpse he saw on the floor while riding with his son. To provoke him further, Ron mocks him, saying his son will one day grow up to be the loyal dog of the Empire. Afterwards, he entrusts the bag of stones to Agony, sternly warning him that it's an important item he must carry at all times, even in death. Like a wet mutt, Agony quietly takes the bag and agrees to obey Rand's command. After handing the bag over to him, Rand heads back to the hunting ground, relieved that everything worked out as he expected in the end. However, deep down he's nervous that his acting was trash, and apart from that, Rand feels bad for what he did to Talon. Unfortunately, all this was necessary to plant a seed in Agony's mind to push him to advance the story accordingly. On the other hand, Talon apologizes to Agony, who simply tells him to consider himself lucky to have escaped Rand's fury. He then orders Talon to go back to the tent to rest, but just then, Talon informs him that he has finally recalled something about the assailant from earlier. He then reveals that it was definitely Ran, but Agony sternly orders him to stop saying anything. Elsewhere, Ron is satisfied with his preparations as he looks forward to the incident Agony is supposed to commit during this hunting competition. According to the book, it was supposed to happen in a year, but that's because his son was killed. However, since everything is happening too fast, Ron decided to fast forward the incident to make it happen during this particular hunting competition. Back in the hunting grounds, Rasia finally tells Dito that he plans to ask the Emperor for rights to develop the area around the temple so that he can clear out the drifters occupying the imperial capital like annoying bugs. What no one knows is that Ron is the puppet master controlling everything happening on the hunting grounds, including pushing Agony to rebel against the royal family earlier than expected because that's a destiny already set in stone. Shortly after, Ran lands from the sky as a crow and transforms into his human form behind a bush. He had made sure to check from the sky for any prying eyes before coming down. As he steps out of hiding towards the camps, Ran can't help but feel guilty for what he is about to do to Agony. The whole situation makes him feel like a villain, but Ran suddenly remembers that according to the book, he's supposed to be a villain. He's about to continue his plans when the first princess, Mental, suddenly approaches him, acting all chummy. This makes Ran a little uneasy as she's the last person he wants to run into right now. Despite being nervous, Ran manages to greet her, but she tells him not to since they're siblings. Mental then questions him about his horse and why he returned alone on foot. Ran lies that he just wanted to take a stroll, so he left the horse behind at the quarters. The smile on Mentil's face instantly vanishes when she hears this, as she sternly questions why Ron would lie to her. Ran nervously feigns confusion as Mental explains that she ran into a black horse while strolling through the forest and learned that it belonged to him. Mental reveals that she actually ordered her servant to slay the horse because animals that refuse to obey royalty deserve to die. Seeing that his lie has been exposed, Ran quickly apologizes to Mentil, admitting that he only lied because he was too embarrassed to confess that he had lost his horse. Before he can finish explaining himself, Mentil gently tells him to lift his head, assuring him that she has no intention of punishing him. Instead, she says she's simply relieved that he made it back safely. Before leaving, Mentil tells Ran to come to her if he ever needs another horse. Ran quietly watches her leave as he admits that Mentil is one of the most difficult characters to deal with because it's impossible to know what she's really thinking. He also wonders why she's leaving quietly, which makes him suspect that her ability doesn't work on him. Back in the tents, a doctor is trying to make sense of the reason why Talon was injured during the hunt. Apparently, Talon lied that he was hit in the head by a falling rock while chasing a beast. Even though the story sounds ridiculous to him, the doctor decides to just accept it. Agony then asks how long it would take for Talon to recover, and the doctor tells him that the injury is quite serious, even though it looks like nothing on the outside. He further adds that Talon will need at least a week of strict bed rest, but this idea doesn't sit right with Talon because he has to miss the entire competition. He argues that as an aide, his duty is to stay beside Agony at all times. However, Agony stops him from making a fuss and lets him know that his recovery is the top priority. He then advises Talon to get some sleep until the closing ceremony while he handles the hunting competition with another servant. Talon tries to protest, but Agony firmly puts his foot on the ground, leaving him no choice but to comply. Agony then teases him for coming to the hunting ground just to take a vacation. Talon happily reminds Agony that he hasn't had a single day off since he started working. Besides, his dream is to spend his life eating and doing absolutely nothing, but since he doesn't have the money to make that dream a reality, he might as well take this opportunity to enjoy himself. Determined to help make Talon's dream come true, Agony confidently tells him that he'll win the hunting competition and use his wish to claim the development rights to a gold mine. Shortly afterwards, Talon falls asleep, and Agony leaves a letter behind, after which thoughts about Ran calling him a loyal dog earlier flood his mind. Unable to fall asleep, he decides to go out for some fresh air, but not before grabbing Ran's bag of stones as ordered. While taking a stroll, Agony thinks back to when he visited the temple with his son and told him the story of the one for whom the temple was built. Apparently, a long time ago the world was in chaos until a being of salvation descended from the heavens. Agony's son had read about this story countless times about the being called Sierra the Great, an incarnation of the gods who wielded mysterious powers. He was known to have subjugated those who waged endless wars, and over 1,000 years ago, Sierra named the unified empire Abiran. Agony told his son that Sierra was the very founder of the imperial family they served. Back in the present, Agony can't stop thinking about his precious son Flynn. Back then, he had urged Flynn to follow in his footsteps to become a proud sword of the imperial family, but now Agony was questioning that decision. As he stops to watch the sunrise, Agony wonders why he's carrying around a bag filled with stones just because a member of the royal family told him to. This makes him question whether he's doing it out of loyalty or just plain habit. Just then, a horn goes off in the distance, signaling the end of the hunt as everyone gathers at the tower to end the event. The crowd is amazed that Rasia has been hunting all night and managed to rack up quite the haul, automatically securing his palace as the winner. The hunting competition was scheduled to go on for 4 days, but now they plan to end it early since the first prince has almost drained the beasts in the forest in a single night. After declaring Rasia the winner of the hunting competition, the emperor asks him to state his wish. The crowd holds its breath as they wonder what Rasia plans to wish for. Apparently, the fourth prince who won the last competition had asked for the right to purge the nomads of the border regions. Rasia then asks the emperor for the rights to purge the vagrants who have infested the area around the Temple of Sierra, which now poses a threat to the dignity and security of the temple. Hearing those words, Agony is devastated as he imagines the bloodshed such a decree would bring. Memories of the corpse he had seen lying on the road that day, along with thoughts of his son, flood his mind. The thought of being branded a loyal dog finally makes him snap as he prepares to do the unthinkable. Quietly apologizing to his son for what he is about to do, Agony unsheathes his sword, causing a stir in the crowd. Back in the tent, Ran abruptly wakes Talon, who stumbles to the ground after getting to his feet too quickly to greet him. Ran advises him to move slowly, or he might collapse from the blood rushing to his head. He also tells Talon to ask the doctor for antibiotics, but changes his mind when he recalls that antibiotics might not be a thing in this era. Talon wonders why Ron came to his tent, and Ron vaguely tells him that Agony might be in a tough situation at the closing ceremony of the hunting competition. Shortly afterward, Talon rushes out to see what Rand means as he pushes his way through the crowd to search for his boss. After making his way to the front, Talon finds Agony kneeling in front of the imperial family while surrounded by armed guards. Rasia then angrily demands to know why Agony interrupted the ceremony. Agony humbly asks the emperor to assign the task of cleaning up the vagrants to the fetus family since they have served Sierra the Great from the very beginning. He also reminds them that his family has protected the imperial family for over 1,000 years, so a lowly task like cleaning up the temple should be left to his family. After briefly considering Agony's years of loyal service to the imperial house, the emperor grants the request, leaving Rasia stunned. However, the emperor scolds Agony for using that same loyalty to stand against the will of royalty. As punishment for his insolence, he hands Agony over to the first prince, and Rasia gladly accepts. As he prepares to end Agony, Rasia reminds him that the price for what he did is immediate execution. Agony willingly accepts his punishment as Talon watches helplessly from the audience, unable to do anything. At the same time, Ran is also in the crowd watching as everything goes according to his plan. However, he hopes that his second pawn piece is also watching from afar. Just as Ran predicted, the main protagonist is in place at a nearby stream as the water from the stream suddenly begins to flow in the direction of the tower grounds. Although not sure, Ran can only hope that the protagonist, Ratel, is in place to witness the execution of Agony and the menace of the royal family he's set to face as the main character of the novel. Back at the closing ceremony, Agony, the hero of the fetus family, hailed for making countless contributions on the battlefield as the former Imperial Knight Commander has now been branded as a sinner for insulting the Imperial family. With his authority as the first prince of the Empire, Rasia prepares to execute him. Rasia engulfs Agony in water, manis, while everyone watches in horror, unable to do anything. At the same time, Agony struggles to breathe as the water engulfs him. In that brief moment, he sees Talon desperately trying to break free from the people holding him back, making him wonder why he came. Agony had hoped Talon would sleep through the entire ceremony after feeling dizzy earlier, but it now seems he had only been pretending to sleep. Nevertheless, Agony is relieved to see that Talon is safe, though he feels guilty that this is how they have to part. As his final wish, he silently hopes Talon will take care of Flynn after he's gone. Suddenly, Agony notices Ran in the crowd, seemingly trying to tell him something, but he can't hear a word from inside the sphere of water. Focusing on Ran's lips, he finally realizes that Ran is telling him it isn't his time to die. At the same time, Rasia launches the water sphere containing Agony high into the sky before slamming it into the distance, hoping the impact will finally finish off the old man. Everyone watches anxiously as Agony heads for his supposed death. Even Flynn, from his castle far away, sees the projectile falling from the sky, unaware that his father is trapped inside it. On the other end of the hunting ground, Ratel swiftly chases after the falling bubble to see what's inside, but it's too blurry to tell. However, after a while, he finally realizes that it contains a person, so he launches into the sky and reaches out to grab the person inside. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it in time, and the bubble falls over the cliff with Agony still stuck inside. Ratel feels a pang of guilt for not catching it as he stares into the distance toward the direction where the water sphere fell. Meanwhile, Talon is devastated as he stares at Agony's boots and empty sheath. The crowd begins to whisper among themselves, wondering what will become of the fetus family now that they have lost their leader. The Emperor then declares that the show has ended, and one of his officials informs everyone that the main closing ceremony will take place later at noon. Rasia dusts off his hands, looking pleased with himself for eliminating another bug. He proudly struts out of the tower grounds, with everyone bowing as he passes. Even Talon has no choice but to lower his head in respect as the crowd continues to mock Agony and the fetus family. After the prince departs, Talon quietly turns away and begins to leave, carrying the weight of being branded a traitor. Ran, who's still watching from the crowd, feels a pang of guilt, knowing that Talon must be heartbroken since he was close to Agony. However, Ron believes that Talon won't break so easily. Back in the tent, Talon stumbles upon Agony's letter, sealed with the crest of the fetus family. In the letter, Agony reveals that he had already foreseen his death and begs Talon to pray that he may find his way to their paradise, Terirum. He also entrusts Talon with the care of Flynn, assuring that this whole situation was not his fault. Moved to tears by Agony's words, Talon continues reading and discovers that Agony has named him the acting head of the fetus family should anything happen to him. With Agony's final blessing weighing heavily on his heart, Talon finishes the letter and collapses. A few days after the hunting competition, Ran checks in on Rasia, who is suffering the backlash of overusing his manis during the hunting competition. Ran lets him know that his condition has even worsened, but Rasia blames it on Ran, who promised him that the black stone would absorb his polluted manis. He then threatens to end Ran if he doesn't come up with a proper answer. Ran then explains that releasing his manis hastily will only make things worse, as releasing it more slowly would be better. Shocked to hear this, Rasia seethes with anger as he secretly vows to tear Ran to shreds once he completely recovers. Although he knows exactly what Razia is thinking, Ran isn't concerned because this disease isn't something that can be cured at once. Besides, Razia depends on his black stone supply for survival, so he can't make any rash moves for now. Right now, Ran is only feeling guilty because he heard that Talon has been in a coma since the hunting competition. He worries that Talon might actually die, but his fears are unfounded because elsewhere, Talon finally regains consciousness. Talon, who seems to have undergone some extensive body sculpting while in a coma, takes a moment to figure out where he is. His subordinate, Pale, rushes over to help him up because his body has yet to fully recover, but Talon brushes him off. Pale tells him that he has been in a coma for over 2 weeks and could collapse at any moment, but Talon insists on seeing the young Duke, Flynn. He then asks Pale about the current situation of the fetus family, and Pale explains that all their business partners have cut ties with them. He also reveals that many of the castle's staff have left, and the family is in dire financial constraints. Pale mentions that they can't exactly ask the royal family for help since Agony has been branded a traitor. As Talon struggles to get himself over to see the young Duke, Flynn suddenly appears in the hallway to meet him. Talon quickly rushes over to humbly greet him while Flynn asks about his health. Talon assures Flynn that he's fine, after which he apologizes for worrying him. Flynn then tells Talon that a lot of problems have arisen in the family and even Agony's funeral arrangements are still on hold. Before Talon can respond, they overhear a couple of servants talking trash about Flynn, blaming him for jinxing his father. Apparently, a rumor has spread throughout the Duke's estate that Flynn is a vagrant, which is why Agony did something as crazy as to go against the royal family. Everyone believes this rumor since the Duke looks way too old to have a child of Flynn's age. The servants then decide to flee the estate before they're also branded as traitors of the Empire. Talon is devastated when he hears this because the brand of traitor isn't something that can easily be erased. He then orders Pale to capture the gossiping servants and cut out their tongues as an example to everyone for spreading false rumors about Flynn. Pale is taken aback by this order, but he immediately decides to comply after being glared at. Talon then announces that they will not be holding any funeral for Agony, which Flynn tries to protest. But Talon lets him know that Agony will no longer be considered a member of the fetus family. Flynn questions why he would make such a decision, and Talon simply declares that, as the acting head, his duty is to protect the fetus family until Flynn comes of age to take over. Talon firmly declares that he plans to use any means necessary to protect the honor and ensure the survival of the fetus family. Elsewhere, Razia is throwing a massive tantrum because he has been stuck in his castle thanks to the strange illness. Enraged, he blames it all on Ran, vowing to tear him apart limb from limb once he regains his health. During their previous meeting, Ran told him to inform everyone that he was entering the Imperial Forest when, in reality, he had to stay stuck in his room. Razia couldn't understand why he would do such a ridiculous thing, but Ran explained that it's because he has some business to handle inside the forest, but he doesn't want anyone to disturb him, which is why he plans to use Razia's name. This is because no one else would dare enter the Imperial Forest once they learn that the first prince is inside. Razia wonders what Ran is scheming, but Ran tells him that he's just going there for treatment. Ran smugly tells him to quietly stay in his room, but before he can finish that sentence, Razia suddenly grabs him by the neck and slams him into a wall, cursing under his breath. Enraged that Ran has been acting impudently around him just because he has a way to relieve the symptoms of the strange illness, Razia wants to put him in his place. Tightening his grip with water, Manas Razia threatens to summon the Empire's scholars to uncover the treatment Ran has been withholding from him. Unable to tolerate Ran's disrespect any longer, Razia attempts to choke him to death. However, Ran remains completely unfazed and breaks into a smile as he calmly tells Razia to hurry and seek out those so-called scholars because his lifespan has decreased once again as a result of using Manis to attack him. At that very moment, Razia is unable to hold on to Ran's neck and begins to profusely cough up blood. Stretching his neck, Ran informs Razia that he won't be able to move for a week if he stops the treatment. He also reminds him how the imperial family will react once they discover that their next emperor has fallen gravely ill. Ran assures him that instead of finding a way to save him, someone else will take the throne as the next emperor. Even though he knows that Ran is probably right, Razia remains stubborn as he hurls insults at him. But Ran sternly warns him to use his tiny brain if he doesn't want to drop dead. Ran also lets Razia know that he doesn't have the patience to babysit him. As he turns to leave, Ran warns him to stop sending people to monitor him because his specialty is disappearing without a trace. Besides, Razia's attempts to track Ran's movements have failed every time, so Ran tells him to stop fussing, as it only delays the treatment and exhausts them both. Before Ran can step out of the door, Razia suddenly questions his goal for doing all this. Ran doesn't respond, but as he heads into the forest as a crow, he admits that his only purpose is to survive his doomed fate. Ran then lands inside the Imperial Forest, carrying a small bag after flying around the forest to make sure no one is around. It turns out the reason he wanted to empty the Imperial Forest is that he plans to freely experiment with his shape-shifting ability. After transforming into a horse, Ran figured he might be able to change into other animals, which would make this ability pretty sick. Today, he decides to properly study and understand this power so he can discover its full potential. The main thing Ran wants to figure out is the condition required to transform into a specific animal. The first condition that comes to his mind is contact, since he touched both the crow and the horse. In order to test this theory, Ran sets a trap to catch some small animals that he can use to experiment on. Ran notes that the trap is a bit crude, but it should work fine with the top-quality berries he brought from the Imperial kitchen. Before he can finish setting the trap, Ran hears a rustling sound in the tree as a squirrel suddenly appears. Since the trap is incomplete, Ran wonders if he can catch the animal, but the next moment the squirrel fearlessly rushes forward to collect the nuts in his hand, taking Ran by surprise. Ran wonders why the little is acting all chummy when he might be a bad guy out to get him. Putting that thought aside, he decides to try the transformation since he already made contact with the squirrel. However, no matter how hard he tries, Ran is unable to transform, so he returns to his thinking board as he tries to figure out if the situation matters when transforming. For example, when he desperately wanted to fly, he turned into a crow, and when he desperately wanted to run fast, he transformed into a horse. This leaves him wondering what action to take to help him transform into a squirrel. While he's trying to figure this out, the squirrel who was acting like his best friend just moments ago snatches Ran's bag and bolts up the tree with it. Ran frantically, calling out to the little guy, and while chasing after him, he managed to grab the handle of the bag. But for some reason, this squirrel seems stronger than even Goku himself because Ran is unable to drag him down. Ran then engages in a serious tug-of-war with the strong squirrel to see who outlasts the other, but the bag's strap snaps in the process, sending Ran to the ground. Later that night, Anna comes to Ran's door with dinner, and Ran tells her to enter. Even so, Anna is a bit uneasy because of how he warned her not to approach his room unless he calls for her. Anna is startled when she sees Ran looking like a homeless dude with his clothes torn and tattered. Ran tells her not to fret and explains that he got his clothes dirty while taking a walk in front of the palace. Ran is relieved when Anna believes the excuse because he was almost caught by her transforming into a crow just a few seconds ago. He's exhausted and frustrated that he didn't achieve his goal of going to the Imperial Forest. Instead, he spent all day chasing that squirrel around the forest and ended up looking like a mess. Ran then orders Anna to bring him some new clothes so he could bathe and change into them before eating. Anna acknowledges the order, but when she asks him about the bag, Ran looks down only to discover that the squirrel followed him home. Before he can grab it, the squirrel rushes out of the bag, making Anna terrified that the scumbag prince might torment the poor creature. She then begs him to spare the squirrel and offers to throw it outside the castle, but Ran urges her to bring his clothes over. Anna is confused for a moment until Ran barks at her to remind her that he just gave her an order. Anna swiftly rushes out faster than the Flash, hoping to return on time before Ran erases the little guy. However, on her way back with the clothes, she bumps into Mental, the first princess. Mental immediately recognizes her as Ran's maid and questions why she's in a hurry. Anna greets the princess, after which she frantically begs Mental to spare her life. Mental then accuses her of stealing Imperial property, but Anna denies the accusation. Trembling like a fish out of water, she explains that Ran dirtied his clothes while walking in front of the palace, so he asked her to bring him some clothes. Mental lets her know that it's impossible to deceive her as she places her hand on Anna's head to read her mind, and know if she's telling the truth or just spouting lies to save herself. From Anna's memories, Mental sees Ran's disheveled appearance, making her realize that her little brother was actually in the Imperial Forest instead of taking a stroll in the garden, as he had told the maid. Meanwhile, Ran is still busy trying to catch the stubborn squirrel, oblivious to the fact that his lie has been exposed. Just to make the squirrel submit, Ran promises to return him to the forest, but the squirrel seems to be out to get Ran, who is quite worried that a rodent strutting around his room might cause issues for him. Apart from that, he can't stand that squeaking noise, which reminds him of the rats scratching the walls of his shitty apartment in his previous life. The whole story is already straying from the original he remembers, which was getting on his nerves, but now this squirrel is trying to make his fuse explode. Ran lunges forward, and this time he manages to catch the little guy. He's just about to shove the squirrel back into the bag when it bites him, causing Ran to drop it. Ran barks at the squirrel for biting the hand of royalty, but the creature ignores him as it scampers up the wall, getting out of Ran's reach. Ran tries to figure out how to capture the squirrel without it fleeing, but the only thing he can think of is transforming into a squirrel himself. He then focuses his mind on it, but just as he's about to give up, Ran begins to feel the usual tingly feeling of transformation. Before long, he transforms into a squirrel, which finally helps him figure out the condition for transforming into a specific animal. However, before Ran can celebrate, the stubborn squirrel suddenly free dives from the wall as if testing Ran's patience. Knowing the little guy might die if he falls from that height, Ran immediately switches back to human as he lunges forward to catch it. Just then, Anna's voice echoes from the door, trying to stop Mentil from barging into the room without permission. However, Mentil ignores her protests as she pushes the door open, boldly claiming that she doesn't need to walk on eggshells around her little brother. Mentil is still complaining when she notices a small dark figure nearby, and upon closer inspection she realizes it is merely a squirrel clinging onto another squirrel. Mentil is instantly disgusted that Ran would allow wild animals to roam freely within a royal residence, while Anna is left completely flustered by the overwhelming cuteness. Meanwhile, Ran, who is currently a squirrel, is a nervous wreck as he fears that his secret might be exposed. By the following day, Ran and the stubborn squirrel had become best buddies. Apparently, since his transformation to a kin last night, the squirrel has been clinging to Ran, making him wonder if it's because he saved it from that fatal fall. Ran considers it a hassle to take him back to the Imperial Forest, so he decides to keep the little guy around for now. Ran was glad that the whole chaotic situation helped him figure out the ridiculous condition for transforming into a specific animal. The crow, horse, and squirrel all shared one thing in common before Ran transformed into them, and that was precisely because he touched their nape, which is the rear part of their neck. Ran feels that this activation condition is way too ridiculous for such a useless ability. Putting that aside, Ran decides to focus on his current problem, which is the first princess. According to her character description in the novel, Mentil was already portrayed as a terrifying figure, but Ran never expected the expression on her face to be even more frightening than what the book had described. After she barged into his room yesterday, Anna lied that squirrels were Ran's pets, which gave him the opportunity to escape through the window. Afterwards, he returned to his human form and came back to the room to meet her. Ran thought everything would end there, but after scolding him for harboring wild animals, Mentil sternly told him to come to her residence the next day, claiming they had matters to discuss. Ran racks his brain as he wonders what Mentil wants to talk about. He fears that she might have uncovered his true identity, but Ran immediately dismisses that thought and decides to just go with the flow since he can't exactly refuse her invitation. A few moments later, Ran arrives at Mentil's residence, where a knight directs him to Mentil's chambers. Ran is amazed by the magnificent doors to her chambers, which are even more impressive than the book described. Upon entering the room, Mentil gently welcomes Ran and offers him a seat to rest his legs. Ran refuses the seat as he tries to jump straight to the point, but Mentil repeats herself as she firmly orders him to take a seat. Flustered by the sudden change in her tone, Ran apologizes for his rudeness before sitting next to her. Mentil gently laughs it off as she excuses his rude attitude, mentioning that he was always the impatient type. She suddenly switches her tone again as she questions when he became a completely different person who was bold enough to venture into the Imperial Forest alone. This makes Ran uneasy, reminding him that Mentil's ability is why he has been trying to avoid her in the first place. Normally, Manus manifests as abilities related to nature, like the Emperor who wields Fire Manus, while Razia wields Water Manus. However, Mentil's ability is unlike any other, and in some sense it stands above all other abilities as her Manus is human. This simply means she has the ability to read and manipulate people's minds, which is considered a terrifying ability. Mentil tries to use this ability on Ran, urging him to come clean, or she might be offended if she finds out that he's lying. Ran tries to stay calm as he reminds himself that Mentil's ability doesn't work on him and she probably knows it, so all this drama is just to intimidate him into confessing, thinking he doesn't know the truth that her ability does not affect him. Besides, Ran also knows that there are two conditions under which Mentil's ability fails to activate. The first condition to be met is that the person must be related to her by blood, and the second is that the target must genuinely love Mentil. Ran has already met the first condition, but he's certain that he has no emotional attachment whatsoever to her, so there's no way the ability would work on him even without the initial block. Like the classic psychopath, Mentil gently urges Ran to answer her question, but Ran is too busy wondering why her ability doesn't work on him. Realizing that Ran has no intention of answering, Mentil decides that she is going to employ another method, and she orders the Imperial Knights outside her door to come in. Two knights step into the room, and she orders them to get Ran to talk, since he is refusing to do so willingly. She tells them that she wants them to slit his mouth, but the knights fearfully remind her that she is ordering them to hurt the seventh prince. The knights let her know that there is no way servants like them will have the guts to touch royalty. The knights fall to their knees, telling Mentil that they cannot obey such a command, while urging her to reconsider. However, Mentil proceeds to use her power on the two to get them to obey her, and in no time, the two reach for their swords. They point their sword at Ran, and Mentil urges Ran to choose his words very carefully. Out of nowhere, Ran mentions that his mother has died, and this shocks Mentil. She asks him what he is talking about, while also asking him why he thought something like that had happened. She wants to know if Ran has been in contact with his mother, but Ran replies that it is not what she thinks. Ran claims that before his mother left, she left him one item, and it is a beautiful necklace with a blue gemstone in the center. She had told him that as long as the blue light didn't fade, they would be able to meet again. However, a while ago, the blue light began to fade, and in no time, the gemstone turned black and shattered. Ran mentions that after a brief moment of him panicking, a thought crossed his mind that the mother he had longed for his entire life had finally been laid to rest in her homeland in the east. Basically, everything he just said to her is a lie because among the many mistresses who bore children for the emperor, Ran's mother was the only one to escape the imperial family. However, the reason why she escaped was never revealed, but it is presumed that she returned to her hometown in the east. There are also rumors that she ran away because she gave birth to a black-haired prince. Regardless of everything that was said, she never appeared until the very end of the novel. Mentil then expresses her surprise because she had always thought Ran resented his mother. Ran replies that he only resented his mother when he was young because she left him. However, he later realized that the reason he was always gazing toward the eastern sky and taking out the necklace she gave him every night was that he missed her. Ran then brings out the said necklace from his shirt, and Mentil asks him if this changed his mind about his remaining relatives. Ran calmly replies that the whole situation is funny because he never thought that a lifetime of resentment could turn into longing in a single moment. Ran placed the necklace on the table, saying this might be what family is all about. Mentil takes a moment to digest everything she had just heard, and she tells the knights to sheathe their swords. She orders them to step outside, and she proceeds to use her power to wipe everything that happened in the room from their memories. Ran stands there wondering if his lie came through, and just then, Mentil walks up to him to comfort him. This is when he finally confirms that his lie worked, and Mentil assures him that he has nothing to worry about because even if he is a failure, he is still her younger brother. Ran stands there, wondering if Mentil is messing with him or not. But he understands the fact that she will become suspicious after her power, which allows her to manipulate people, has suddenly stopped working on him. Moreover, Ran has never been on Mentil's side to begin with. Nonetheless, Ran is just glad that his lie worked and he survived to see another day. Basically, the necklace was just a cheap accessory that he found lying around. Suddenly, it dawns on him that he doesn't even know what happened to Agony. In the original story, he fell down the valley and lost his legs. This time around, he wonders if he has managed to meet the protagonist because he can't think of a situation where Agony died. Somewhere deep within a cave, Agony finally awakens after having passed out during his supposed execution. He quickly surveys his surroundings, wondering if this is Terrarium, the promised paradise. Just then, Rattel, who has been sitting quietly in the shadows, speaks up, which suddenly startles Agony, who frantically asks about his identity and whether they are still in the land of the living. Rattel explains that he thought Agony was dead since he had been passed out for a long time. He then pulls out his sword, declaring that he's about to begin an interrogation. Pointing the sword at Agony, Rattel questions whether he's loyal to the Empire of Aberan. Confused by the sudden question, Agony struggles to understand Rattel's intentions. Rattel then makes it clear that Agony's answer will determine whether he lives or dies. Agony tries to move, but realizes that one of his legs is broken, and with the way Rattel is standing, he can see that he is a pro, so he stands no chance against him. Agony tries to be diplomatic, urging Rattel to put away his sword while asking him exactly what he wants. Rattel then tells him that some days earlier, he spotted a water sphere crossing the sky, and even though he tried chasing it, he ended up losing it. Rattel mentions that from what he could see, there was someone inside it, but since the sphere got smashed onto the ground hard at incredible speed, he is pretty sure that whoever is inside would have been blown to bits. Unknown to Rattel, the person inside the sphere is actually Agony, and even Agony himself has no idea how he is alive. He wonders if he was saved because of the stone bag. He also notices that the bag is not with him, which means that it has fallen off during the execution. Rattel expresses his frustration by pushing his sword into the wall, close to Agony's head. He then moves over to ask him in the name of their god, Amica, if he is loyal to the Aberan Empire. Agony hears this, and he immediately realizes that he has run into a heretic. This throws him into a moment of deep thinking, and he remembers how he urged his son to become the sword of the Empire to wipe out the heretics threatening the Empire. However, at the face of death, Agony knows that he can't misspeak, and he tells Rattel that he knows nothing about loyalty to the Aberan Empire. He claims that he just lost his footing while wandering around carelessly because he is nothing but a senile old man. After this, Rattel helps him treat his leg, but he makes sure to tie a rope around his ankle to restrict his movement as they walk through the tunnel. Agony urges Rattel to take the rope off because he can't even run, since he has no idea where they are. He adds that he will only get in the way if he can't walk fast, but Ratel still refuses his plea to take off the rope. Agony continues by telling him that he is already so old, which means a fall can be disastrous, which means he won't be able to get back up if things go wrong. He lets him know that this basically spells more trouble because it would be hard for him to drag him, but Ratel ignores him and even pulls on the rope harder to cause him pain. With this, Agony realizes that Ratel has no intentions of listening to him, and he decides to accept his fate. Nonetheless, he is surprised that there is such a detailed cave like this close to the Imperial Forest, and he also remembers that Ratel mentioned Amica earlier. Amica is basically a group of heretics that are believed to have been wiped out over 50 years ago, which begs the question of whether they have been hiding in the cave all along. Agony tries to think back to before he lost consciousness, and he remembers that he was launched towards the western or southwestern side of the forest's central tower. He is pretty sure that the moment he makes his escape, he will be able to pinpoint the cave's location, but he just needs to focus on understanding the cave's interior in the meantime. He plans to return with reinforcements later on, but it suddenly dawns on him that he is already branded a traitor. He is pissed at himself for believing that he is still the Imperial Knight Commander. Just then, Ratel asks him what his name is, and he answers honestly, revealing that it is Agony Fetus. Ratel then tells him that he was actually surprised when he found him because the cave is actually protected by divine blessing, so it is not a place anyone can enter by their own will, most especially someone from the Abiran Empire. They soon reach what appears to be a dead end, and Ratel pushes his blade into the wall, which ultimately generates a bright, blinding light, leaving Agony with questions. When the light subsides, Agony is surprised to see that there is a pathway before them which leads to a temple. Ratel then tells him that there are only two possible reasons why he found himself there. It is either that he is a minion of the Abiran Empire who has been sent to wipe out the heretics, or he has come at the calling of their god, Amica. Nonetheless, Ratel welcomes him to Amica's domain. Back in the capital, Ran still has Rasia pouring his manis into the stones he gave him. At the same time, Ran expects the protagonist to make his move sooner since he has found a way to accelerate the timeline. Ran rests comfortably on the couch while Rasia is stressing out, and he can only think of hearing from the protagonist. Just then, Rasia yells at him, smashing his hand on the table, asking him why he only brought a handful of stones when he is supposed to bring a bulk load for him to use so he can get better. Ran casually turns to look at him, asking him if he just yelled at him, and Rasia quickly apologizes, telling him that he was only frustrated since he doesn't know how much longer he has to keep up the treatment before he gets better. Ran then tells him that he already informed him earlier that rushing the treatment will only ruin his body, which is why he has to have some patience and take it slow. Rasia loses it again, yelling at Ran, asking him if there is no faster method to get it done. Rasia then mentions smoking pot, and Ran asks him what business that has got to do with anything. Rasia reminds him that he was the one who said that it was bad for him the first day he barged into his room, so he suggested that he quit. Ran remembers this and he chuckles nervously, telling Rasia that it is better for him to quit, since it is bad for his health. Rasia turns around in anger and heads to where his drinks are, but little does he know that smoking and even drinking are bad for his health. Basically, food is even poison to him, and this applies to whatever he consumes. This is why he is destined to rely on the treatment he is receiving for him until the day he dies. The only solution is if the seed planted in his body is gotten rid of. Ran then suggests that they wrap up the treatment for the day, since they can't afford to be late for the evening ritual. During the ritual that evening, the princes and princesses are all surprised that Rasia's manis is increasing day by day. Since he still boasts of more manis than everyone else, the ritual is concluded earlier. While everyone is leaving, Ran decides to stay back because he doesn't want to draw attention to himself. He is minding his business when his usual nemesis, Selos, shows up to disturb him. He grabs him by the head, asking him why he is still there even though the ritual is over. He makes fun of him, asking him if he is thinking about his mother, who ran away when he was little. It is at this point that Ran realizes that he has to do something about Selos to stop him from disturbing him. Selos is in the middle of this when Mental shows up, asking Ran why he looked gloomy during the ritual. Selos starts trembling with the emergence of the first princess, but Ran calmly greets her. Selos still thinks the princess is talking to him until she faces Ran to ask him if he is unwell, but Ran replies that he isn't, but the ritual is particularly boring. Mentil expresses her relief that it is not more than that, and she tells Ran that even if the ritual is boring, it is still a ritual of great importance, so it would be best for him not to make it obvious that it bores him. After this, the princess turns around to leave, but Selos loses his mind, yelling at Ran, asking him why the princess is worried about someone like him. He demands to know what is going on, and Ran realizes that he just found himself in more trouble than before. Out of nowhere, Rasia also appears on the scene, grabbing Selos from behind, asking him if there is any problem and why he is disturbing Ran. Ran quickly comes to his rescue, telling Rasia that it is nothing because he was merely exchanging a few pleasantries with Selos. Ran then walks past the first prince, leaving Selos even more surprised. Dido, the second prince, then walks the first prince away from the room. On their way, Dido tells Rasia that Talon appears to be plotting something, but Rasia tells him that he has no interest in the fetus family because they have just 1 year left, which means he will be the one to inherit the land afterwards. Dido shocks him, telling him that there is no need to wait 1 year because he has a good idea. On the other hand, Selos is still crashing out on Ran, asking him what the hell he is, and Ran casually replies with his name. However, Selos wants to know why Mentil and Rasia are interested in someone like him. Selos conjures a small flame in his hand and he threatens to burn Ran to ashes if he doesn't confess. Ran replies casually, asking him if he is not about to put himself in a tight spot because he is basically trying to mess with him with a manis that can barely light an oil lamp. Ran then asks Selos what he thinks would happen if the others find out about his pathetic manis, and this stops Selos dead in his tracks because he doesn't expect anyone to know his secret. He starts trembling, and Ran tells him that if he wants him to keep quiet about it, he will have to fix his trashy attitude and learn how to address him like his older brother that he is. Back at the fetus family's estate, Talon's order is being carried out and the offenders have their tongues removed. Talon also ordered that everything related to Agony be burnt, while adding that there will be no funeral or anything to even remember him by. Talon lets the household know that whoever disobeys this order shall be severely punished. Later on, Talon receives a visit from the commander of the fetus knights, Jack. He tells Talon that just as he ordered, they have apprehended those who were spreading false rumors within the Second Knight Order, and they have held them accountable by cutting off their wrists before expelling them. While telling Talon that the punishment has been dished out, Jack yawns, and Talon asks him if he is tired. He apologizes, revealing that they are currently short-handed, which is why he has been working through the night. Talon commends him, telling him that he has done well, and Jack presents him with the list of deserters that he asked for. Jack mentions that they are tightening security to stop the runaways, but nearly half of their manpower has already run away. Talon checks the list and realizes that even the families that once served the family have cut ties with them. Seeing this, Talon figures out that it is over for the fetus family if the discipline among the staff also collapses. Jack expresses his concern, telling Talon that he believes that erasing all traces of Duke Agony appears to be extreme, and he believes that it might only provoke those who remain loyal to the Duke. Talon shocks him with a scary voice, asking him if he thinks Agony is still the head of the family. Jack startles and quickly apologizes for speaking out of turn, revealing that he only struggled to believe that such an honorable man like Agony could meet a dishonorable end. Jack still doesn't understand how someone as loyal as Agony would do such. Taking a closer look at Talon, Jack could see that he is now a completely different person, leaving him to wonder if it is because he feels betrayed by the Duke. After looking through the documents in front of him, Jack suggests that they leave. Moments later, Talon stepped onto the podium after everyone in the land had been gathered. They are all curious to know what he wants to say because they have heard reports of how disloyal people had their tongues cut off. Some of the soldiers are even contemplating running away, but they are scared of what would happen if they are caught trying to run away. Talon then begins his speech by revealing how the house has served Sierra the Great since its founding. He mentions that for over 1,000 years, it has enjoyed the honor of standing beside the imperial family as its closest guardian. However, as it stands, the situation has grown chaotic of late, and he is pretty sure that everyone present at the meeting is aware of why this happened, which is because of Agony, who is a traitor to the imperial family. Everyone is stunned when they hear Talon casually say this without batting an eye. Talon continues, saying Agony betrayed the Empire and was executed by the imperial family. He mentions that this single event has shaken everything that the house has built over 1,000 years. He lets them know that among them are many who doubt the loyalty of the house. He lets them know that he is only going to give them one chance, so he tells them that anyone who wishes to leave may do so that very day, even if their contract is still active. However, he lets them know that the house still has someone who will uphold its 1,000-year oath. He mentions that until Flynn grows to succeed the throne as the Duke, it is his job to continue proving their loyalty to the Empire and the imperial family. He then finishes his speech by letting them know that whoever abandons their loyalty to the house will be punished severely without mercy. Talon's words and the determination displayed on his face shock everyone listening to him. Jack understands that he sounds harsh, but he knows that he is right because the house still has an heir and there are still countless opportunities for them to prove their loyalty to the Emperor. Talon's methods are imperative because the more he makes the house better, the sooner the house will regain its footing. However, Jack knows that he is going to miss seeing Talon flustered whenever he is being teased by the servants. After the speech, Talon asks the aide, Pal, if the temple has honored their request, but he tells him that the temple already said that they will no longer receive anyone from the House of Fetus. Talon is not surprised by this, and he reaches into his jacket pocket to bring out a sealed letter. He tells Pale to send this together with the next request, adding that they are not going to regret reading it. Deep down, Talon has no idea why Agony rebelled against the Imperial family when he knew that this only spelled death. He wonders if the drifters living around the temple really mean the world to Agony. Even though he doesn't know a lot, Talon is determined to make sure that Agony's death doesn't go in vain. He prays that Agony watch over the land that he entrusted to him while he makes it prosper. Later on, Talon finally gets invited to the temple, and upon arriving at the temple, he is blown away by how magnificent it is. Talon steps into the temple with the intention of stopping whatever Razia has in mind. Meanwhile, Razia and Dido witnessed the speech Talon gave, but instead of being impressed, Razia was only interested in wiping out the family. Elsewhere, Ran heads to the Imperial Forest with the aim of adding bigger animals to his list, since he is done with small animals like foxes and rodents. Surprisingly, the squirrel followed him into the forest even though he tried to ditch the stubborn animal. Nonetheless, he grabs the squirrel and he squeezes it inside his bag so he can protect it better in case of danger. Seeing how stubborn the squirrel is, Ran wonders if it also transmigrated into the novel. Soon afterward, Ran finds the monster he has been tracking, and he quickly comes to a halt. The monster, which is a giant wolf, appears from the thick shrubs, and Ran tries to be friendly, telling the monster that he just wants to touch its nape and leave. However, the wolf looks pretty intimidating, and there is no indication that Ran would get it easy with the wolf.